Welcome to the Fantasy Football Forge. As always, my name is Steve, and we are going to finish up the post-combine series here, getting ready for the 2023 NFL Draft. We're going to finish it up with the running backs, and I will have 16 names, 16 prospects coming up in this list on this episode. So I will be going through this episode in a little bit of a different format once we get into it than normal. You may notice that means that I won't have a quarterback video for this. You know, there's so much more that goes into quarterbacking than the athletics, than, well, the height and the weight and stuff matters, but especially than the athletics. And so it's just not an area I feel comfortable getting into based on the amount of information that I know on these players, on these quarterbacks, but I do have opinions on them. Everybody loves to argue about the top quarterbacks of the draft, so let me put my opinions out there into the world. I have the top 4 quarterbacks of the draft in this order. I have it CJ Stroud, Bryce Young in at second, Anthony Richardson at third, Will Levis at fourth. So for me, CJ Stroud is just, he may not be the best quarterback coming into the draft specifically, namely Bryce Young, from everything that I know, seems to be the most talented and have put the best tape out into the world and performed, had the best production at the previous level. But for me, CJ Stroud is just the more prototypical guy of those two. You know, the size limitations for Bryce Young are concerning to me to an extent, especially to a demand extent at the very least. If you go with a guy like Bryce Young, there are going to be limitations to an offense. Just ask Pete Carroll about that. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't be successful with a shorter quarterback. We've seen, especially ask Pete Carroll how to do it. We've seen success with shorter quarterbacks, and I don't doubt that Bryce Young will be great at the next level. It just comes down to who I think might be able to have a longer, more sustained, and play at a high-level career. And to me, that is going to be CJ Stroud by a nose hair. So we'll put those guys as 1A, 1B. And then, honestly, I think we can get a 1C in here with Anthony Richardson. I absolutely love what I saw at the combine from him. Those are different situations than, being out there and having pressure come at you. But honestly, between him and CJ Stroud throwing, I thought that Anthony Richardson had the better day all around. I thought CJ Stroud had a couple of higher end passes, a couple, as far as best passes on the day, maybe CJ Stroud owns the 1 and the 2 spot there. But he also had a couple of worse passes. Anthony Richardson was really, really clean all day. He had a really good touch, anticipation, just threw really well. And, I won't be shocked, and there's going to be a reason here, especially for CJ Stroud, if Anthony Richardson were to go number 1. But I wouldn't be shocked if these quarterbacks don't go in the order that we're expecting them to. But how I have them ranked is how I expect them to go to at this point in time. And then we have, I think at a clear 4th spot here is Will Levis. I don't see him going above these other 3 from everything that I know and have seen. Now, I did catch a few of the media sessions. I caught 2 of those guys' media sessions and a couple of other guys. So I'll run over those 2 as well here. First up is Aiden O'Connell, who actually looked pretty good at the combine throwing. But as far as him up at the podium, this is what I wrote. I wrote, nah, not feeling him. So apparently he wasn't very impressive up at the podium, at least not for me. But once again, did look quite good in the on-field drills. Then we have CJ Stroud coming up next here, caught his, and I wrote that he looked comfortable, felt comfortable, whatever, up at the podium. And then I do have a couple of not-so-great notes for him. He calls people boss quite a bit, as I recall. Maybe everybody he called boss. That would be media people. And I don't know about you, but for me, like, the people that I've seen and met in my life that use the term boss when talking to somebody have typically rubbed me the wrong way. So that doesn't mean they're a bad person. That doesn't mean I don't like them, but at least aspects of their personality have rubbed me the wrong way. So I just thought that might be telling about some of who CJ Stroud is personality-wise. Might be. He also said, quote unquote, I look up to Deshaun Watson. And, that's fine if you look up to the player Deshaun Watson. But, there's a lot of things surrounding that player that it makes me question your decision-making skills. I know that there are some connections between CJ Stroud and him, as far as I understand. Maybe the same trainer and or same agent as Deshaun Watson, who he's working with. And so, there might be some connections there. They are probably friends or friendly with each other. And so I get it, but decision-making skills. And at quarterback, decision-making is a huge thing. Some things you just keep to yourself. Know your audience, whatever, however many ways you want to say it. Then I have Stetson Bennett here. I wrote that he has a typical veteran quarterback-like quality, which makes sense. He is an older prospect. So in that sense, that can make sense. And what I was really getting to, though, when I wrote that, was that he has a quote-unquote I don't care type of mentality, personality, way about things, which is probably a really good asset to have when you're facing diversity, which obviously quarterbacks face a lot of diversity on a game in and game out basis. And I know that he's also faced some diversity previously, which was kind of the reason for this note. That came up in his questioning. I looked it up, I found out what it was, and I've since forgot it. I don't think it was some huge deal, but there was some criticisms for him. I think he got arrested maybe after the championship game, something like that. But ultimately, hopefully he does care. As long as he does actually care, and he just kind of has that personality about him at this level, you got to care in order to continue to improve. Between that and then just seeing him at the combine and the on-field drills, do you think that he probably makes for a quality backup quarterback at the next level? I like him as a backup. Then I also caught Bryce Young's media session, wrote that he was confident and smiley. And then I also wrote that he was maybe a touch nervous, but he was hiding it well. And so I never came back and clarified that. So I assume I don't know for sure if he was nervous or if it's just who he is. Either way, he was hiding it well. And I've said before that I think that on itself, being able to cope with things is a quality that's better than not. So Bryce Young didn't ultra impress me. Definitely no knocks on it, though, either from his media session. And that is going to be it for that. You can find this data. This is from the Combine. This is all the Combine data for this position. You can find it up at the website, www.theffforge.com, as well as all the other positions information. If you have any questions on that, you can refer to most of the earlier, especially the earlier the video go on, the more I explained it in this series. Or you could always ask them in the comments. And of course, comments about players are welcome. I think that is going to be good enough. So let's get into this position, starting off with Mohamed Ibrahim, who is all the way down here. And so here we're going to be starting off with a guy who stood out as a very agile, smooth, balanced, and instinctive cutting runner. He should be a great fit in a zone or a gap concept rushing offense. Unfortunately, he didn't do any more athletic testing and just got his physical here, and I saw him in the on-field testing. So don't have anything else to go off of from the combine information. Additionally, he had a lot of lower body injuries over the past 3 seasons. And for him, I did happen to catch his age, and I haven't really, in this process, generally been looking at the guys' ages and using that to gauge where I think they'll end up getting drafted, because I'm not really trying to predict where I think they'll get drafted, more so where what kind of value I put on them. That said, I did catch his age, and he is older, and so both that and the injury factor are going to definitely be hurting his draft stock. Another thing here that's going to end up hurting his draft stock probably is that he looked absolutely great as a runner. Loved him as a runner. That's why I wrote his name down as someone who caught my eye. However, when we got into the receiving drills portion, he really didn't look so good. So that was a bit of a knock as well, a little limited in what he can do, what he brings to the table. As a runner, he appears to thrive between the tackles as he lacks enough speed to be getting out onto the edge during runs, which was also part of his issue in the passing drills, as he was often just not where he needed to be when the ball arrived to where he should have been able to catch it. I really, really like him a lot as a runner, but there is a lot working against him here. I think that he'll make a great rotational player for a team for a few years, several years, so long as he can stay healthy. I think that he becomes worth taking around the 5th round just purely because I do think that he's a really, really solid, good runner, but also those limitations hold him back. So 5th round seems about right to me. I would love to see him go earlier than that, but I wouldn't be surprised if he goes even later than the 5th round. Wouldn't be shocked due to those drawbacks. One thing potentially working in his favor as far as drafting him and stretching it here, but maybe it works in his favor, is that teams will not be expecting to have to give him a big payday for his second contract at the next level as long as he's successful and has earned one, because he will be 28 years old at that point in time, and so he won't have much leverage, unless, of course, he absolutely goes off. But other than that, I think he can make a nice career secondary running back on a team for a while. Then the next player I have on this list was Kenny McIntosh. These first 4 players are players that I wrote up that caught my eye in the on-field drills. Kenny McIntosh is one spot ahead of where I just was, right above Mohamed. And Kenny McIntosh was another guy who I thought looked really good in the on-field drills at the Combine, and he has a more legit chance than Mohamed does of becoming a starting running back at the next level in the league. He's a more well-rounded player, that is why, and he's also younger than Mohamed, so a little more room to grow, time to grow. Then we have Deuce Vaughn. By the way, Kenny McIntosh is 6 foot even. Mohamed Ibrahim 5'8", and now we're gonna get to Deuce Vaughn, a little guy here. So we'll just look for that. Deuce Vaughn is 5'5". We'll zoom that up, make sure that all his athletics are showing. And Deuce Vaughn is another guy who, actually, he's a guy who I went into the Combine with excitement to see. I wanted to see what he would look like. He was already on my radar coming into it, but initially, he didn't, during the running drills, he didn't catch my attention. I was actually a little bit let down from what I was seeing, so I didn't write his name down. But as the day went along, and especially as we got to the receiving drills later on in the day, later on in the hour and a half, he looked a lot better there, and to me, he earned a spot to get his name written down. So, good for Deuce. No, really, he's still somebody who's on my radar here and want to see more, but just wasn't impressed with the early stuff in the running drills and wanted to see more than that. Then we're going to get to Cam Peoples, who is 6'1", and Cam is the 3rd guy down on the prospect score right up there. You can see all of his numbers. Cam is on the taller side at 6'1", which personally I prefer him short like Deuce Vaughn, but not always. Nothing wrong with a little bit of height at running back either. When Aaron Jones says, and Aaron Jones was at the Combine talking, doing some of the additional commentary, and he said that that's my guy. He plays a lot like me, speaking of Cam Peoples. And when he says something like that about a player, you listen. And I listened. I have been listening. And he had Cam Peoples had a pretty good Combine in the on-field drills. He had a few hiccups here and there, however. He has nice long arms and he has large hands, which are great assets to have in the passing game, both as a receiver and as a blocker. Also, his size is helpful in the blocking game compared to being undersized, so that's not a question. He showed some solid burst out of cuts, and I think that he would give fits to smaller defenders at the second level while in the open field. He doesn't have a lot of receiving production in college, so that does not help him, even though he profiles very nicely as a receiver, as maybe a 3rd down back at the very least. And there are some definite issues with him. So I'm going to give him a 5th round draft grade, but honestly, I'm trusting Aaron Jones on this one. I don't think that I would have given him a 5th round draft grade if it wasn't for Aaron Jones pointing him out. Might not even written his name down. In reality, I still think that he does get drafted, has some some traits that you just can't find on everybody. But I think it's possible he goes undrafted. Really, just kind of depends. I think he's in that group of guys who may or may not get drafted. So those are the first four guys, and the order that I would put them in at the after everything's said and currently how my feelings are about them, I would go Kenny McIntosh at number 1, followed by Mohamed Ibrahim at number 2. I may put Deuce Vaughn higher than Mohamed, maybe even higher than Kenny, but currently Deuce Vaughn's at the 3rd spot and Cam Peoples in at the 4th spot. Reason for that little delay there. I originally had written that I had Deuce Vaughn and Cam Peoples too close to call at this point in time, but honestly, just like my gut, my heart keep going back to Deuce Vaughn, and I just watched a video by Brett Coleman who called out Deuce Vaughn, so go Deuce Vaughn. I like him. I hope he's a fun guy. Let's keep going to Jahmyr Gibbs is the next name on this list. Here he is. He is 5'9", and I think that he is an absolute great size for a playmaking running back, which is what he is, so that's good that he fits that. Jahmyr is an excellent receiver out of the backfield, elite, some might say, and he is a home run hitter when he is rushing the ball. He had the second best 40 time in this year's draft class at 4.36 40, which is plenty good enough. Even though it's not elite, it is still, it's enough to get her done, as they say somewhere in America. I struggle with not liking Jahmyr more than Bijan Robinson, but I understand why Bijan is projected as the number 1 running back in this draft. Totally understandable. My number 1 running back currently. That said, I was really impressed with Gibbs in his media session at the Combine, more so than Bijan, but as you'll see, it's not Bijan's fault. It's really just that Jahmyr Gibbs stood out. I did catch both of their media sessions. Jahmyr Gibbs, what I wrote for him is that he shows some understanding of real football versus combine numbers, and I think it's easy for young guys. I mean, look at me, I'm older than him, and I still love combine stuff, combine numbers, but he shows an understanding as a guy who put up a combine number that's really impressive in the 40, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's who you are on the field. And so I just appreciated that understanding, that maturity, that knowledge of the game, the game IQ that he was expressing during his media session. And I also wrote that he thinks before he speaks. He's a guy who goes into situations with a plan, and so really appreciate that about him. Big fan of Jahmyr Gibbs coming into this draft right now. Then Bijan Robinson, I just wrote that he was a lean boy and that he was confident. So no knocks on Bijan based on his media session, just Jahmyr stood out. Then I have 2 names here, the next portion, Devon, Achane, and Keaton Mitchell. And Devon Achane is down here. We can just look for the speed. So there's Devon Achane, and then Keaton Mitchell right here are the next 2 guys on this list, as I said, and they are also the other 2 speedsters in this draft. That is why they're following up Jahmyr Gibbs. They're very exciting in their own right. Devon Achane is the better prospect of these 2, but he did not stick out to me if he was in the on-field drills. I don't even know if he was at the Combine. However, Keaton Mitchell did, and it wasn't for good reasons, unfortunately. I believe it was initially, and then it wasn't. As I recall, he looked out of control from his speed, and I don't know if that's just because he was trying too hard. Guys were slipping around a fair bit, and like in the wide receiver drills, they were just trying to go too fast, and they were slipping, so definitely could have been an issue of trying too hard for Keaton Mitchell, especially given the type of turf that they were on and maybe its condition. The thing about that, my issue with that is, given his vert and his broad jump, that shows that he has a really, really strong base, and that would lead me to believe that he has excellent control of his hips. But that's just not what I saw during the running drills at the Combine. So once again, there are definitely some issues here for Keaton, but I would prefer him over Cam Peoples, that's for sure. He could absolutely be a home run hit for a team in the mid to late rounds or wherever he's drafted. I think that Keaton could be a home run hit, and I think that Devon Achane is an even better prospect and a very exciting home run hitter himself. Then we're going to go on to a few names here. Evan Hull, Tank Bigsby, Tyjae Spears, and Zach Charbonnet is borderline makes this list, but those were 4 guys who I was specifically coming into watching them at the combine to see what they looked like. And unfortunately, for one reason or another, all of them just they didn't necessarily impress me. I didn't fall in love with them, we'll say. They are still all above average prospects physically and or athletically. Consider them notable mentions. And in case it didn't come off this way, I do want to say specifically in the on-field portion is what I watched, and that's where they didn't impress me. Not that some of their combine numbers aren't impressive on their own. I did catch the media sessions for two of those guys. First up is going to be Tank Bigsby. He speaks loudly, was my first note, and then I also wrote that he also speaks clearly and with confidence with his words. Right, and he's also right to the point with his statements, with his wording. He also talked about liking to pass block, and he seems to have a solid head on his shoulders, I wrote. So all of those things were things that I really, really liked about him. I thought he was quite impressive. Then we have Zach Charbonnet, who was very well-spoken, and he has that all-American quality about him. He also had some nerves up at the podium, and he just really wasn't elaborating very much on his answers at all. I don't know if that was because of the nerves or what, but it was a lot of... there's a difference here between being clear, concise, confident with what you're saying, and not elaborating. Tank Bigsby was getting the point across and saying enough words to paint a full picture with his answers to questions, whereas Zach Charbonnet, it was like 1 word, 2 word type of answers. Just something I noticed. Really, no knocks on Zach Charbonnet, though. There was nothing negative about his press. Just, I don't know. I would need to talk to these guys more to really draw more of a conclusion, just observations at the very least. Then we're going to come to a few other guys here to wrap this up. First up is Chase Brown. There you can see him second up to the top on the prospect score. And the vert and the broad numbers there show some elite explosiveness and power in his base, which is obviously an incredibly important tool for a running back to have. His bench is great, and his 40 time is also very good, as you can see those two numbers there. I think that he shows the tools. He has the tools to pass block very well. I think he has the tools to hit the home run, and I think he has the tools to run for some power in short yardage situations. All of those three things are things that a 3-down back needs. And so, to me, that makes him like a 3rd-round prospect for me. He's not maybe one of those top end running backs in this draft class, but he has all of the tools there in order to be a starting running back. Give me a guy like that in the 3rd round. However, when I looked at the scouting report for him, some interesting things came up. What I saw didn't really necessarily agree with exactly what I'm seeing here on paper for him. I was slightly surprised. Things that surprised me a little bit were his light feet and his elite speed to the perimeter. Not that he had a bad 40 time or anything, but just it's not elite based on, what he did on the track field. But it's very nice to hear that it is elite in game. And then the other thing that was very surprising to me was that it was mentioned that he does not have enough power to move the pile. Once again, to me, I'm seeing a lot of power here based on his numbers. So, very shocking, and ultimately I'm going to lean a little bit towards what I'm seeing on paper here for Chase Brown. They're telling me, put it like this. I'm taking some of what I'm seeing on paper, and I'm taking some of what I'm getting from the scouting report, and I'm kind of mashing them together, and what I'm seeing from that is still a really great prospect anyways. So even if he's not exactly what I thought, I still like Chase Brown quite a bit as a prospect and still hold that 3rd-round draft grade strongly on him. Definitely, I think, my guy. I don't think most people have him as a 3rd-round guy. Then we come to the last 3 names of this video. Tavion Thomas, Tyon Evans, just a couple spots up ahead of him, and Hunter Lebke down here. And these are our big boys of this draft class. Hunter is a fullback. That's part of why he's a big boy. and he is probably the best prospect out of these three, in part because of the fact that he is a fullback. Frankly, he's just bringing more to the table than these other two guys are because of those skills that he has as a fullback, whereas the other guys are a little bit more one-dimensional. Between the two one-dimensional bruisers, I do have a favorite. So between Tavion Thomas and Tyon Evans, I like Tyon Evans more. They're both later round situational guys, but I think that Tyon has a better chance of becoming more than that out of these two. I really like his build. He is short and stout, and I like that as a tough guy to take down. I find him to be sort of, but definitely not, in the same mold of one of my favorite running backs that I brought up earlier, Maurice Jones-Drew. If we were to mash Tyon together with Chase Brown, and then we'll just give him a heavy dose of Deuce Vaughn too for the height, I think that we would get ourselves a Maurice Jones-Drew. But in watching some of the film, some of the tape on Tyon, I really saw a guy who was tough to take down in that Maurice Jones-Drew way. Maurice Jones-Drew was hard to get your hands on at first, and then once you finally did, was usually up at like the second level, smaller guys, and they couldn't handle him. So Tyon's not going to get the advantage of being as short as MJD was. Doesn't quite have the same speed as MJD did to burst out of that hole. He'll be able to be seen instead of hiding between the tackles like Maurice Jones-Drew did. But as far as contact balance and just toughness to take down, Tyon was he was really good in those departments. I was impressed with what I saw. I liked his style. I could keep talking about these running backs. I could find something good to say about every single running back probably, but we're going to cut myself off here and wrap this video up. So I am going to give your YouTube feeds a bit of a rest. Sorry, I know they've gotten a little bit bombarded as of late. I don't like to do that, but I also need to get the content out. So it is what it is there. In the meantime, I will be going into my den here. Already started that, and looking closer at these guys, starting to build my draft boards and ranking these guys, and also be working on my mock draft, NFL mock draft 2.0, 1.0. Haven't released any yet. So that should be the next video, so hopefully look forward to that. And I'll continue on the NFL draft stuff until the NFL draft has happened, and then I've been paying attention to free agency, of course, and I'll flip gears at that point back to fantasy football. I think this is all important for fantasy football, and that's why I follow it and get involved with it. I also like it. It's fun, and I like real football and fantasy football. So thank you very much. Take care. I will see you short enough. One more note additionally, I spoke in a video recently about how I was planning on moving across the country. Although I'm not moving across country, I still am making a move, so there will be a different visual here within less than a month. And that will also take a few days of my time just as far as moving stuff and setting things up. And I'll work around it the best I can, but yeah, that'll take up some time of mine. So thank you very much. You take care.